Brighter days. Yes, Sumu, Mirror of Time. Welcome back to Build Theory, the Raging Rant Edition. I'm Aurian Archive, and let's get started. The initial response I have right now is one of pure, almost unbridled rage. And to start with, I'm going to state two simple, uncontested facts. These are not up for argument. These are not up for debate. These are statements of fact. The first one is the slave population in America was not 100% comprised of people who were born in Africa or descended from those who were born in Africa. The slave population in the United States and other countries, be it European, Mediterranean, South African, Chinese, Oriental as in Korean, or what's known as the Korean Peninsula now, Japan, and so on around the world, the slave population was made up of those who were impressed into service aboard government ships running under charter, those who were captured, be it merchants, be it civilians, be it military of a foreign nation, by a competitor, be it government, national, or otherwise, and that all of those countries, nationalities were sold on the slave market, on the slave markets around the world. The population of the slaves in what became the United States was not exclusively ever solely those descended of African descent. Slaves included the French, the Spanish, the Greek, the Italians, even British subjects were held as slaves in the United States, and the same can be said for every country, every nation, every government that allowed the sale of human flesh as slaves. There is no single nationality on the planet in the US that can claim exclusivity to any reparations or damages from their ancestors having been slaves. Let me say that again. There is no race, no generation born today that has an exclusive right to complain or request reparations for their ancestors, therefore their forefathers and their foremothers having been held as slaves, no matter what their nationality is. The idea that African American U.S. citizens are somehow more slaves than the French, German, Israeli, Egyptian, pick another country here that had citizens who were taken as slaves by ships running under charter and sold in slave markets. I think you get why this is a rage inducing subject. So let's start with the second uncontested, undeniable fact. Something where if you do not accept this, you immediately forfeit any and all credibility as a writer, as a journalist, as an opinion poster. And that is to deny that critical race theory is garbage. If you do not accept that critical race theory is a racist theology, ideology, concept, construct meant specifically to destroy and damage and promote one single race above others, you are a racist. You are the racist, not the people around you. You. You are the problem. It's that simple. Now, obviously, I read something or heard something in between the last stream and this stream to send me into a "you are the problem" rant. And quite simply, there is a gaming site. Well, they theoretically say that they are a gaming site. They haven't actually covered games in the traditional sense of a gaming site. In several years, they have become a political opinion site, and they are approved by the Google propaganda machine to, well, I don't have a polite way to say this, and I know that I try to keep my language clean just in case anyone is watching, and I really don't have a clean way to say this. The site, which is Kotaku, is basically being paid to make excrement up. They're just they're making up excrement, throwing it at a fan, and hoping something splats somewhere and makes a mess. Ugh. Cell Dweller, Clayton, I think is his real name, or something like that. He's got a song. He's got a song, "Shoot 'Em Up," and which is a brutal, a brutal and aggressive take on the monotonization of tragedy, chaos, and confusion. Uh, and as I strongly suggest just looking it up and playing it. I don't know where Cell Dweller stands religiously or politically, but it's a the song carries a specific message that is worth listening to. Okay. Now we can talk, or I can, since don't really have anyone to bounce off here right now. Uh, the subject of the demise of gaming websites to clickbait. All right. I guess I'm going to frame this another way. When I started in games journalism, when I started writing about games, reviewing games, writing documents on game design, and aggressively trying to help developers make the best games they could possibly make, one of the aspects, if you will, of that era is that a trade show like the Electronics Entertainment Exposition was all about the marketing positioning of what the game developers were going to be doing. E3 was all about the publishers and developers getting together with the retailers and downstream, everyone who would be responsible for getting the game on store shelves and give them a handle on what was coming up. It was a place where deals were cut in the press rooms over which games were going to be on the kiosk at the local Walmart, the local Kmart, the local Roses, whatever. It was the determination where publishers worked with the downstream, the retailers, to really show off the new wares, give the retailers a hand on how they could pitch their in-stores displays. It really began life not as a press exposition, but as a industry exposition where everyone who was involved in the video game industry, from developer to publisher to retailer, all were very interested in what was being shown off, what was being coming, because that's what allowed everyone to position their plans on what they were going to do going forwards, going into the rest of the year. When I actually started attending E3, though, when I actually was going out to California, being there as a presence, speaking with the developers, beating the developers at their own games that they hadn't even completed, something kind of became clear. E3 wasn't anymore about the. Oh, I must be shooting at a door. It. E3 was no longer about the in industry getting together and deciding on the course of actions, what they would be doing, what they would not be doing, so on and so forth. E3 became a press event only, where people were just there to take pictures, shoot video clips, but not actually learn anything about the games. There wasn't really the first E3s I went to, there was a very strong focus on if you had a closed door meeting with a developer or a publisher, they really wanted your feedback. What was wrong with the game? What did you see that they didn't see? What was your take? What was your reaction? What been as a reviewer, as somebody who was versed in games, who had written theories on games, what could you bring to the table that maybe they just didn't see? All right, here we go. Arrest him and close the window and send the tank in. And as part of, as we've seen going forward, the E3 Business Summit, the really failed Santa Clara move, and then whatever E3 has become these years, where major publishers just don't even bother showing up anymore. They just host their own events because E3 offers them nothing. And that's because E3 went from an industry event to just a press show off. But E3 was never the kind of exposition that could survive that kind of change. E3 didn't start out about the fan base, about making nice with the fans. E3 started out as basically an industry check. What's working? What's not working? What are you doing? What am I doing? Uh, it was a time in which developers who very rarely ever spoke or communicated with each other, one of the few times that developers from one team or another had a chance to actually go and talk with one another. That's a pretty big deal. One of the few times that you'd have an upstream software vendor like SGI or IBM or Intel on hand with with the product developers who could answer specific questions about the hardware or software that maybe a third party developer may not have had access to because their only access was the dev kit that they had, or maybe a Windows PC, or maybe a Unix PC, or maybe they had went out and bought an SGI system to build upon, but they couldn't afford a service contract. It was one of the few places where everybody could pick everybody else's brain, and all of that really did matter. But now, there's not really. All right, let's see where we ended up. We ended up at. I reached a new level. What's my experience look like? Come on, give me the mouse over. Uh, I need to go level up to see it, I think. Oh, no, I know how I can look at it. I am now, because of the missions didn't complete at the same time, I am a little bit shorter, uh, comparatively speaking, but that's not really a big surprise. Train up to a new level, and alright, we'll finish burst out with one. Okay, I got Shauna Stockwell, King's Row. I really don't want to do the twin shot arc because it's kind of stupid. I think I've got enough levels where I can go ahead and head over to the Hollow, so that's where I'm going to head. Excuse me. But the shift in game development, the shift in focus, the shift in everything else, it really does have a back effect. It almost is trivially, in a trivial manner, easy to get lost in what gamers want or don't want. It's very easy to look at mega hit games like World of Warcraft and say, we need to copy that success. Well, you don't copy that success. World of Warcraft got that way because of what it did at a specific time and what it was. Simply copying it isn't going to bring the crowd over. World of Warcraft has to do something that either loses players or something else has to come along that is different and offers an attractive proposition that World of Warcraft players say, you know what, I'd rather go play that instead. It's different, so I'm going to go play it. And that's what's happening with Final Fantasy XIV right now. Is Final Fantasy XIV is just different enough that it's able to pull World of Warcraft players away. No, oh, there's a guy. Try talking to the guy with the big yellow spinny thing over his head. All right. I think I may have to do for those door missions, start doing a four submission. Okay. 10 outcasts. All right. Yep, there's some outcasts over there. All right. Annie. And speaking of games that do things differently, what is it? Warframe? Tennokan? Going, apparently that was a blazing success. I've been asked before, do I actually play Warframe? And the casual answer is, yeah, I do have a Warframe account, or rather, I have a couple Warframe accounts. I actually started playing Warframe on the Nintendo Switch, curious to see how the motion controls work. Now, if you've never played Metroid Prime 3 on the Wii, you might not have a good handle on how first person shooters should control if you have a little bit of motion control. The Metroid Prime 3 is an excellent study in how to implement motion control aiming without causing issues. Warframe, when I tried the motion controls, was incredibly jittery and like almost unplayable and how much the aim jittered. And if you play Metroid Prime 3, one of the first things you notice is that the screen does not move as you aim your cursor around the screen. The screen only moves when you hit the edge of the screen with with your cursor, with the targeting cursor, or when you hold down a button or a modifier to do something to make the screen move. You need to turn around in a hurry, and I think that was like down plus B. Uh, and when you're doing something like that, but Warframe bound the control, the motion strictly to one to the aiming cursor, so that the camera moves with the aiming cursor rather than having a dead zone where the cursor can move and the camera doesn't move. The result is an incredibly jittery experience that I described as unplayable. Now, I don't know if Warframe ever fixed that. I tried Warframe on a different platform, and it never really struck me as there was a lot to it, but it quickly ramped from a and again I find myself drawing comparisons to another game. If you've never played Global Agenda by High Res Studios, this may not necessarily make a significant amount of sense. Global Agenda had a very good tutorial, a very good first set of missions. But after you got out of the tutorial and kind of got into the game, it couldn't ever decide if it was a PvP game or a PvE game. It could never decide if it was simply forcing the players to, excuse me, go up against other players, or if it was simply, or if it was going to put challenges, environmental challenges, puzzles that you have to work around. No, I don't want to talk to Meg Mason. All she gives is just repeat missions. And that really became problematic because there was no real consistency to your character's progression. Um, okay, there we go. Yellow arrow's gone away. And if there's no consistency, if you basic it's the classic problem of why I keep shouting don't lock rewards behind PvP play. The only way you could be good in PvP play or be effective, because of the way the game was constructed, you pretty much had to farm the PvE instances, get something enough to boost your character up, and fly, defender, fly! It basically it threw you to the game changed after you were already playing the game. What you started out playing was not what you ended up playing. Uh, it would help if I put the correct power there. Oh, that's right. I hadn't gotten. Oh, that's just embarrassing. Alright, next time swap into defensive mode if they charge back at me. Alright. Anyways, with Global Agenda, you wound up playing two different games, and you didn't know that you were going to be playing two different games until you were already playing two different games. And that's the kind of the core problem with Warframe is that you start out strong with an effective solo mission that introduces you to how the game works and the concept of the Tennos and the characters and the whole Warframe concept. But it doesn't take long before you get someplace else and suddenly the game changes. You get handed various mission task dailies. You suddenly go from a first person shooter to an MMO that's pretending to be a first person shooter, or rather, you go to an RPG that's implemented in a first person shooter format. I want to be careful here with the MMO nomenclature. Uh, Simply because I took a big issue with Elder Scrolls Online, because when people said online, said MMO Elder Scrolls, I was thinking Skyrim, but with multiple players, not World of Warcraft with Elder Scrolls names. Yeah, so yeah, if you're using MMORPG and you just mean uh, World of Warcraft clone, just uh, keep getting distracted and away from the point, which is par for the course for hybrid theory. All right, so bringing it back to Warframe. Uh, when you get to the point where suddenly you have this entirely different game than the one that you've been playing, it's at best discouraging. At worst, it's just demotivating. You gotta go do something else. And that's kind of how I was with Warframe. Is I just kind of got to the point where everything opened up, and I went, "What is going on here? This isn't what I started playing." Now I harbor no doubt if you spend time grinding with it, and if the transition from the tutorial zones and initial missions to here's the actual game was a little bit better done, for all I know, it may have been reworked. I might have a different opinion of Warframe. Anyways, since I really got away from the first point, when gaming sites or theoretical gaming sites stop being about the games, stop being about the gameplay, stop being about how things work, stop being about tips and tricks, stop being about reviews, and instead casually insert phrases like uh, critical race theory deniers into their text in an article that's supposed to be about gaming, not political ideology, all that does is just convince actual gamers, the people who actually spend money on games, that whoever's writing the article is a blithering idiot that they're probably best off getting away from as quick as they can. It's not really that complex. I mean, if you're going to talk about games, you need to be very careful about where you stand politically. You need to be very careful about where you stand with your ideology. You need to be very careful about understanding the market, what the economic models of gaming are. You need to be very careful in making sure that you're not saying something that's politically motivated for pure ideological reasons. Now, you're kind of saying, but aren't you doing that? Putting a lot of politics into gaming streams? Well, fair point, yes. The problem is, I can actually point to facts and data and real world evidence. In this case, going back to the what I opened this stream with, I can go back to the actual registers of slaves who were counted in order, at least in the U.S., for the uh, slaves are a portion of a person determines your population, determines your representation in Congress and the Senate. Yeah, I can go back and look and point to those actual roles and go, uh, Francois Dubois Alagoon is probably not African American. That's a pretty French name right there. Probably not even sure I pronounced the last name correctly. When you see something that is a distinctly Israeli name in a slave register uh, from centuries ago, when you see Greek names and you kind of go, something's not adding up here. Those aren't African names. Those aren't traditional someone who was, born in downtown Atlanta, Georgia as a slave on the plantation. That's not a name like that. That looks Russian. Well, it could have been if it was a Russian sailor that was on a ship that was captured by someone carrying a governmental mark and then was promptly impressed into service or sold.